Okay, so you heard a little bit about the Research Collaborative earlier. Zoe mentioned the Research Collaborative, and what I put up there is a quote from the Charter. Now, this collaborative has been talked about for some time. It predates my arrival at Action for ME, and I sat there in it might be my second or third week, and I had to go to a meeting in London at the Royal Society of Medicine with all these eminent professors, feeling quite small, quite little, wondering what on earth I was going to say and what my role would be as a new incoming Chief Exec for Action for ME. But actually what I can say is it's been a really interesting journey. I love this part of my work. And actually, we have a very powerful voice within that collaborative, not least because we are speaking with a large number of people affected by ME alongside us. And that is not something that researchers themselves can always say that they do. We know there are plenty of research projects out there that when you think about patient and public involvement, it is very, very low. So the Research Collaborative is a group of people that have come together essentially to develop and establish a national strategy for research in this field. The idea is to work better together, to stimulate more interest in the field and to bring people in from outside, as I talked about earlier, but actually to also stimulate more funding. And for that reason, there are observers on the board. So the Medical Research Council are an observer on the Research Collaborative Executive Board and actually helped fund the first annual conference, which was held last month at the beginning of September. It's also to facilitate discussions and collaborations between researchers to promote and raise awareness of the need for research in this field. And we've been talking quite a bit within the Research Collaborative. It was launched on the 22nd of April, I think, in 2013. And since then, the Executive Board have met a number of times. We held our first conference, and that was the first time in this country we had over 70 researchers in the ME/CFS field coming together in one room. And many of those researchers said, I didn't know there was so much research going on in ME/CFS. And actually, I've just sat next to somebody that's doing something really similar to me, and I didn't know they were doing that. And we're now going to collaborate together. We're going to share our data. We're going to, get ethical approval for this, that, and the other. And I also know of at least 2 or 3 new collaborations that have formed as a result of people coming together at the conference, and an application that's being developed at the moment for mainstream funding for a very large piece of work. That's a huge amount to come out of 2 days spent together, and I think we're going to see an awful lot more that will come from that. So the researchers listened to a number of presentations. We had 3 international speakers, including Professor Lipkin, who came to talk about the work that he's doing in America. He talked about his micro work that he's doing, looking at what's going on in the gut, and there's plenty of information that you can read about those presentations on the Action for ME website. We've got a report that's not quite finished, but you can go and read a summary of the presentations that's been pulled together. We had some people with ME volunteers that took audio clips and have then written those presentations up, people like Simon McGrath, who writes in a number of different forums. And we will also have the last one that to come is the summary of Lipkin's presentation. We have a film of Lipkin's seminar that he did for us the day after with the ME Association that will also be going live as well, hopefully soon once he's signed it off, because he presented some data that he doesn't want on camera, so we've got to sort of play around with that a little. So that conference was hugely exciting, and as part of that we had 60 people with ME carers, clinicians that joined us on the Monday afternoon for a large workshop that over 20 researchers attended, and Mary-Jane's going to say a little bit more about that in a minute. But that information that we've taken away from those 2 days is now being analysed. We're looking at what more we can do and develop as a result of those people coming together. Some really basic things like, how can 2 researchers sit together and not know they're doing something very similar? how is that making the best use of money, the best use of patient time, the best use of their time, university time, and so on and so on. So there are things that we could do. You know, could we actually look at and send out some kind of survey that says what research is being undertaken in your university, in your teams at the moment, and bringing that all together, kind of scoping exercise that people at least know if they can work with others, that they can go to a place where they can find that information. The other thing that we talked about at our last board meeting, and you can read the minutes of the board meetings again on our website, is actually what can we do to work. We had the conference, that's a kind of bottom-up approach, working with researchers, with people affected by ME, but what needs to happen at the top? How can we create some kind of systematic and systemic change in this whole field? We need people at the top level, those who have responsibility for developing strategies, for investing in ME/CFS research, all of those kinds of things. How can we get them together in one room for a couple of days, and then that includes the charities, and get them to thrash out what's it going to take to create the change that's needed in this field? What solutions can you come up with and then go away and deliver as a result of those 2 days together? So I've been really impressed by Professor Stephen Holgate, who talks very passionately about work in this field, who said at the conference and has said on film and when he's been out visiting local support groups, this illness has a biological cause. It's likely to have a number of subsets. There may be a number of causes. There will need to be different treatments for different subsets. But what we know is there is absolutely not enough research, and therefore the Research Collaborative under Stephen's leadership has come together to invest our own time to stimulate more funding and more interest in the field. And what he's hoping is that this grand challenge, as he calls it, will lead to the systematic change in the field that we so desperately need. So I'm not going to say much more about that. You can read more in the minutes. You can listen to Stephen's talks. We've got one that he gave at our AGM last year in the research conference. There's a talk that he gave at EdMesh, the Edinburgh support group, that's up online on their website. You can hear from Stephen himself, but you can also read his words. I think he gave some fantastic kind of summing up sort of statements at the end of the 2-day conference, and they're in the report, so you can read those as well. So I'm now going to hand over to Mary-Jane, who's going to say a bit more about the public patient involvement session. But if you want to know more about the Research Collaborative or about any of the 3 charities here today, you have an evaluation form which we'd really like you to fill in, and you can tick a box, and if you leave your email address, we'll contact you, because you can also become an associate member, and that's free to join as well, and you'll be kept up to date with the work that we're doing. So I'm now going to hand over to Mary-Jane.
I'm just aware that we have run over quite significantly in the last hour, and I wouldn't be in the least offended if people need to get up and leave. All I would say to you is, if you do, I would ask you please to hand your evaluation form to Colin on the way out. Those evaluation forms are so important to make sure that when we do this again, we deliver what you'd like to have. So as with Sonya, AIM is really proud to be part of this collaborative. And what was unique about this 2-day conference was that Stephen was passionate, as were we, about making sure there was patient involvement. And we had a fabulous afternoon session with, I think it was 80 patients, 60 patients and 20 researchers that took part in it. And again, there were people there representing every part of the patient population. And it heightened the profile of those most severely affected. They were mentioned quite often throughout the session. This session was facilitated by a fabulous lady called Sally Crowe, who many of the patient charities know and respect. She has personal knowledge of the condition, and she has great respect for patients with the condition. She's an outstanding facilitator. I really admire her work. And I was very proud to put her name forward for this. She worked very closely with Sonya and Sonya's patient reference group, the words wouldn't come, to make sure that this session would really make the most of the time that the patients had with the researchers. That was crucial. Without that pre-conference work, it would have been a nice activity, but it might not have achieved its goals and its ambitions. And I can tell you it did more than that. There were people with ME, there were carers, there were clinicians and researchers all together, and the buzz in that room was something else, let me tell you. The objectives of the workshop are here, but I'm not going to read them out to you. As Sonya said, all of this work is available, this activity is available on Sonya's website, so you can go and read it yourselves at your leisure, a little bit at a time, without having to exhaust yourselves. I think what was really important for me is session 2. People could choose which of these 5 categories they wanted to look at in depth. And from the 2 sessions, hundreds of I've never seen so many stick-it notes in my life, were produced. I think it was something like 300 stick-it notes were circulated and taken away by Sally. What a piece of work she had taken on. I was really pleased to be able to facilitate one of these groups, and I know my co-facilitators were equally pleased to have been asked. The level of discussion just surprised us all, that the amount of time that people had given to think about this before they came along the day impressed everybody. And there were key questions that we've been asked to consider. But the things I want to just mention to you of these 4 points, that there was an atmosphere of openness and willingness to share. The debate discussion was respectful and engaging throughout. All points of view at every time were heard and respected. And there was an amazing amount of enthusiasm of all present to work collaboratively and continue to move this agenda forward. The 2 groups that looked at the area that I was looking at, which was moving ahead on research priorities, came up with 14 separate bullet points, and you'll find these in the report. I think Stephen Holgate is the reason why this collaborative is working. We all hold him in such respect. And he said right at the end, don't forget for the collaborative, this isn't the end of the meeting, this is just the beginning of the journey. One of our parents attended the collaborative and took part in a different workshop. And he said the mixture of people attending the conference was amazing. There were parents there like me, as well as doctors, researchers, psychologists, people who had significant experience of ME/CFS, and people who were not so familiar with it but wanted to know more. A huge benefit of this collaboration was the scope of everyone attending to make a real difference. But you wouldn't know about this. The patients out there that can't be here today and can't go to other conferences wouldn't know about it if it wasn't for Claire Ogden and Action for Me, who has diligently produced the report, which is available for you all to read online. I have to say I wouldn't have wanted to take that job on, so thank you very much, Claire, on behalf of every single patient. And actually ourselves, because I've been back in and looked at it already at least 10 times, trying to remind myself of what we did, what we talked about, what we discussed, and finding quotes and stats. So sincere thanks for what was a very daunting piece of work. I want to thank everybody that's turned up today. I want to thank all the speakers. I'm going to hand back over to my colleague in a moment to finish off. But Colin wanted me just to remind you that Sussex and Kent is your local ME/CFS charity. And if you're not a member, please see Colin or David on the way out, and they'll give you a form to enable you to join up. And I have to fly the flag for Sonya and I as well. Joining both charities is really easy via our websites. I've been scribbling this afternoon. Let me just make sure before Keith jumps. Oh, and Sonya wanted me to say that although the camera failed today and we haven't been able to film it, podcasts will be available on their website. And I think those are all the things that I promised to mention at the end. So I'll hand you back over to Keith to close the session. Thank you.